Hello there. Thank you for joining us. Very glad to be here. If you're unfamiliar with this, my name is Ben Montgomery. I am a longtime newspaper journalist and nonfiction book author. The only book anybody's ever heard about that I've done is Grandma Gatewood's Walk. The story of the first woman to solo through hike the Appalachian Trail. You should all buy it and read it. Thank you very much in advance. And I'm here, glad to be here with the man of the hour, my friend R.J. Young, who I'm not going to tell you a lot about, primarily because a lot of this book you spend time getting to know R.J. And so I don't want to steal thunder in terms of a build up here, but know this. I agree with Kirkus Review, I believe, who called RJ a new and important and powerful voice. To read RJ's books is to read works of passion, stories that needed to be told, things that needed to be said. And this is what I want to talk to you a lot about tonight. So once again, thank you for joining us. We are here to talk about Requiem for the Massacre, Black history, on the conflict, the hope, and the fallout of the 1921 Tulsa race massacre. It turns out that I too am from Tulsa. RJ, you weren't born in Tulsa. Where were you born?
No, I was born in Oklahoma City on Tinker, as it were, and got a roundabout way to getting to Tulsa. I would also be remiss if I did not say, no, you probably heard of Grandma Gatewood's Walk, but I'm going to point you toward not just The Leper Spy or The Man Who Walked Backward. I'm also going to point you to A Shot in Moonlight, which is one of my favorite books because it's about a black man who chose to shoot back at a bunch of Klansmen and the fallout of such. It's very cool. And if you have not read any of Ben's reporting about the spectacle of Claude Neal or the Dozier Boys, which inspired Colson Whitehead's Nickel Boys, you should go do that. He is the treasure here, and it is my privilege to be joined by him. Ben, dude, like I know you're from Tulsa. But you played high school ball at Westmore, yeah?
Yeah, I was born there at St. Francis Hospital.
Okay.
Also, my family lived in Slick, which was on Highway 16 between Bristow and Beggs. So birthplace, birth certificate says Tulsa, but home was really kind of outside of there. But both of us are Okies. And I wonder, you chose to stick around. You chose to live in Tulsa. A lot of us, especially those of us who want to be writers, wind up finding a way to get out. And you kind of took a different route. Your family left and you spent some time in other places along the Gulf Coast and came back. But walk us through your biography and the important highlights, if you would, because this is much of the book is spends time in sort of memoir and getting to understand, know you. And I think that's an important part of all of this because it's where the fire is. You have to understand the context of you and your experience, I think, to understand the fire. So what do people need to know about how you came up, how your family was structured, and those important things?
It's actually really cut and dry when I talk about it, but I'm always told that it's not that cut and dry. So I'm born on Tinker Air Force Base because both of my parents are Air Force veterans. My mother being a captain flying on AWACS and stuff. And after they decided to leave the service, she wanted to move closer to her mother to help raise me and my baby sister, who's 23 months younger than I am. And that ended up being Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And I kind of fall into civil rights movement royalty in my grandmother, who is absolutely the jewel of my family. She has a research grant at the University of Southern Mississippi in her name. My third grade book report, which is also subject in the book, is in the archives at USM because she was telling me things that apparently she didn't tell anybody when I was 9 years old. And that became something of historical record. And that's
what's the room, what you call her?
Grandmommy. Yes. Grandmommy with an E. She's not anybody's grandma or anybody's grandmother. She's my grandmommy. And she would always correct me on that. And every time I got a card, sign with that E at the end, no Y. Peggy Jean Connor, it's her name. Single mom, owned her own beauty salon, owned the house that her parents lived in with her and raised my mother inside of, and my late Uncle Denny Frank. So quiet, a very quiet strength, because my grandmother was absolutely showing up when there was work to be done, and never unless there was. So one of the reasons that she is such a big deal is when it became time to sue the state of Mississippi for voting rights and reapportionment, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party needed to have somebody's name on the lawsuit. And my grandmother was the secretary treasurer of that party. And they were saying, Ms. Connor, you don't have to do this. Like, this person's going to catch a lot of hell. And she said, is that not my job? Is my job not secretary treasurer? Cool. Then let's do this. And that has been my grandmother's story the whole time. She's never been, or she's past 2018. She had not been the kind of person to just yell out or show out. Although she was standing at the Forest County Courthouse being picketing and getting spit on in the face. Her marriage at the time is recorded in the colored part of the marriage license, which is still a wild fact to me. I had to go to Hattiesburg again as an adult to make sure that I was right in that. But she's the person that I grew up learning so much about because I was her grandson. And that's how she treated me, and that's how she introduced me. And I didn't really know who my grandmother was until I was made to write about my grandmother in third grade. As a matter of fact, somehow we always tend to think that our parents, or our grandparents for that matter, aren't that big a deal unless we're really lucky and we're smart. I wanted to write about Frederick Douglass for Black History Month. Some of my friends got to write about other historically Black significant figures. And my teacher said my grandmother had to be my subject, and I was mad about it. And I told her I was mad about it. And she chuckled and she said, some people think I did some things worthwhile. I'll tell you about them. And that really kind of set me on the journey of finding out what it was that my grandmother was standing for and why it was significant to me as a child, right? As it stands right now, I can put a piece of paper into a box because of my grandmother, who suffered more than anybody should for the opportunity to vote, right? My father's job took precedent over my mother's job at the time. So we moved to Panama City, Florida, or lower Alabama, lower Georgia. If you've been to the Panhandle, I know that Destin is not far away from there, but you know, I'm a kid that grew up on both sides of the Hathaway Bridge. So it means something different to me. I learned to skateboard and surf. I also learned to play football.
A lot of people who aren't familiar with that part of Florida. I mean, we're like, this is really the deep South in ways that other parts of Florida are not the deep South in terms of sentiment and culture. Am I right?
Yeah. And that's significant in that the first time that I'd ever heard of any such massacre at all was in Panama City, Florida, in elementary school. Rosewood was used as a racially charged epithet toward me. And I didn't know what the hell that was, right?
Can you recount that experience?
Yeah. So I wanted to play catch with a group of boys who were all white, and they wouldn't let me into the game. Okay. So I, being myself, decided to put myself into the game by snatching the ball out of the air as it was going to someone else and running away from it, running away with it till I get their attention. And I was pushed to the ground and the ball was ripped away from me. And you're lucky we don't rosewood your ass. And I'm just like, first I was offended and mad because I'd been pushed and I'd been taken advantage of. Went to teacher, tried to tell them what's going on. Nothing really came of that, but I told my mom about it. And that was my mother's first opportunity to really activate something in me outside of Hattiesburg, which is home for me. Like I grew up to know Hattiesburg as racially segregated. Grew up to know it as the Deep South. At the time, Florida's still Florida to me. Like my parents, had a good house, like we thought that it was a move up. But we get home and she had rented.
Did you know did you have the context for that? What it meant to be?
No.
You're going to rosewood your ass?
She, at the time, John Singleton's movie was coming out. or out. No, it's out because we had it on VHS from Blockbuster Video back when that was the thing.
Mm.
And we watched it together.
Mm.
And I really wasn't allowed to ask any questions as we were watching it. And I remember going, is this what, Mom, is this? Yeah, this is what they were threatening to do to you, whether they knew it or not. And I think it's one of these really interesting moments in my life because Rosewood was in the popular vernacular at the time, or popular consciousness. And that sort of a story kept following me around, right? As a matter of fact, I believe I know the paper, Ben helped me with the journalist's name. Thank you. Is where I found the story. And it was very much like this one in Tulsa, where nobody wanted to talk to him about it.
Mm-hmm.
He had to keep going back. He had to keep asking questions. He had to more or less earn people's trust just to open up a little bit. And out of all of that has come not just the movies and the history, but damage was paid, right? Reparations were paid.
Right.
Words so charged that
the only time, so far as I know, and the last I heard, the only time that a similarly situated group has been awarded by a state in that manner. These are the descendants of the victims of the Rosewood Massacre, who each got a small payout from the state of Florida in 1994.
And that was all news to me, as it was news then. But I mean, this is 1997, right? And I'm just getting ready to go to middle school, where I'm going to learn a whole different way of living, and just how far we have and have not gone, right? There's another story about me wanting to dress like Blade for school and getting in trouble because I resembled because I wore Blade wears a trench coat. He wears black pants. He had a vest. I had on a button-down shirt, but that was enough to set off alarms at Jinks Middle School, Jinks. And I never really recovered from that because superheroes are my mythology. I mean, there's Marvel posters and whatnot. And he was the first Black superhero I can remember who showed his face, right? Like Spawn, I go back and forth. I'm not sure that character is, let's say, the performance of him is not as Black as you might think. But Blade, Wesley Snipes' Blade, there's no mistake in that, right? It is unapologetically himself. And that was taken away from me in one way, shape, or another, over and over again. But my mother was
a moving moment in the book. I'm sorry to interrupt you, RJ. This is a moving moment in the book, and I want to pause to talk about this because I think the messaging is important. Like you triggering a response like this for dressing like a superhero. Must have had such great impact on your life, like getting in trouble or sort of having a negative experience around this expression of this guy is me, this represents like the best of us for the first time. And the society is telling you, on the contrary, you're scary. You're scaring us. That's so powerful in terms of a shaping event. Am I right?
Yeah, but it's also one that was reinforced over and over again, right? And I've never gotten used to that that I could never be the protagonist, right? That didn't hit me as a child. It's as an adult, especially when I love Tenet. I get it. John David Washington is the main character. The character's name is the protagonist. And I thought that too was speaking to what I'll just speak for me, what Black folks, myself, am feeling, because it also meant that it didn't matter how good I was. It didn't matter that I could be excellent, that this could be used to push me into other places in the world, that I could be charged up by this. It only mattered that I represented first a threat. And that is what I took from it, is everywhere I go, people don't know me. They're going to see a threat before they see somebody that is human. And as much as people want to push back against that, it's been true most of my life. So much so that when it doesn't happen, I always mark it. I
How do you
always
mean?
mark it because it's so infrequent. One of the Ben wanted to help me. That's a kid. It's coming out of college. I wanted to know how to do what he was doing. And he was just kind, especially knowing that I'm from Oklahoma. That was the bond, right? Of all things. And the idea that that was going to be my story, that was going to be his story, because that's how he's viewed too, right? He's viewed as a threat. He's not viewed as a superhero.
Yeah.
If anything, anti-hero might be more applicable to a character like Blade. But when it was time to get hectic, that dude was always on the side of good, right?
Yeah.
He was always going to do it his way. And from there, I learned what Black culture not just represents to others, but what it can mean to me.
Yeah.
Okay, now that you know that this is going to be what it is, how do we deal with life as it goes, right? And that is getting into historically Black universities and colleges of those sorts. It's getting into the things that we claim for ourselves that aren't. Say, another way of putting this is Ben can come to the cookout, okay? If Ben doesn't know how to play spades or dominoes, he will sit there and learn to play spades or dominoes, right? It's not going to be off-putting because you're going to be welcome into my house, into my backyard to have fun with us in the way that we have fun. But I'm also surrounded by people that aren't like me, who don't look like me, who don't see me and see a peer, see something to investigate or perhaps be wary of. Yeah. And all of that is represented in a 12-year-old incident that doesn't come from children like the Rosewood incident, but from adults, right? Adults could think a 12-year-old capable of such evil because I happened to dress like some folks they saw on TV.
And as you know, for the longest time in Florida, where you were, it was criminal to be incorrigible. If you were a kid before the 1970s, you had no legal representation, and you could be accused of being incorrigibility and sent off to the Dozier School for Boys, where you were then free labor, essentially for a profitable facility. So we're not talking about a distant disconnect with the past. We're talking about injustice where you were in reach of 20 years less. I just mean to sort of shrink the focus here a little bit, place and time. So take us to RJ to Oklahoma, that family move, and talk to us quickly about what you began to build there, how you found journalism, because I want to get into this rediscovery of Tulsa, but we need some more bio first. Fill in the blank from Florida to Fox Sports.
My father got another promotion, and that promotion led us to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was a very big deal for my family at the time. My parents are evangelical Christian, very proud and very pious. So the move to Tulsa was also just very cool because Tulsa is home to Oral Roberts University, Victory Christian, at the time, Higher Dimension, Church on the Move, all these places that frankly were on my television in Panama City, Florida, on the Trinity Broadcasting Network, which is still in Dallas. So it wasn't that far away. And at the time, I was homeschooled for a couple of years, and I decided that I wanted to go to high school. I didn't want to homeschool in high school. I didn't think it was going to be any fun. And my mother thought I should apply to the only magnet school at the time in the city, which is Booker T. Washington High. And I knew enough about Booker T to know that if you graduated, good things were probably going to follow you. And that was how I was beginning to build my life. I was building my life so that it had a very high floor. I'm an Eagle Scout, not necessarily because I love the Boy Scouts above all else. I got exactly 20 days and nights of camping, right? Because that's the minimum you had to get for camping. And it was the last merit badge I got. I got Eagle Scout because it was proof that I was going to be okay in my life, right? Yeah. It was pushing toward forward. Booker T. Washington was another example of that. They were pitching at the time, I think they still have this, the International Baccalaureate degree, which basically gets you 2 years of college while you're in high school. I didn't know how grueling that program was until I was trying to do it, and I was failing.
It's
But
the
as
most rigorous education that you can't pay for, right? I mean, it's school and incredibly rigorous. Yeah.
And the idea of trying to play a sport and also being a part of that curriculum was just too much for me. And I was starting to crumble underneath all of it. But my favorite English teacher at the time also had started a book club, also started a newspaper, and she encouraged me to participate. Read everything from like Patricia Cornwell to we voted out Catcher in the Rye. We're not going to read it, right? Those sorts of things. But she led me to another English teacher who would come to define basically 16 years old to 25 years old, and Dr. Rebecca Simcoe, who introduced me to the humanities and explained to me how those things interact with the things I already liked. Superheroes, for instance. I'm the guy that quotes Shakespeare now because she taught me how much I could learn from it and how to love it. And that's where I get the need to tell stories, the need to perform, quite honestly, in my job. But I didn't know that at the time. It was a way to survive. It got bad. I tried to perform self-harm. My mother still being on it. It's like, okay, what needs to change here? I can't go to Booker T anymore. Cool, you're going to Memorial. And she pushed that through with like 3 weeks left in a semester where it could have gone all bad for me. And people were saying it could. She's going, no, I need to get him out of there because my kid tried to kill himself. Let's not, no. So I ended up going to Tulsa Memorial, which was a much better place for me, a place that was ingratiating. And frankly, I was way ahead when I got there. So I did not have to work as hard at school as I had before. And I got to play football and I got to play baseball and I got to be an upperclassman at a high school, which is still really cool. Came out there with a pretty decorated letter jacket and on to the University of Tulsa because, well, I'm the dude that got his appointment to the Naval Academy and then didn't go. I stayed home. I went to the school down the road. And that was another set of challenges, right? It's not an easy university to graduate from. Most private schools are not easy to graduate from, especially those that bill themselves as Harvard of anywhere. Tulsa bills itself as the Harvard of the Midwest, which I also thumb my nose at because there's one Harvard. It's just them, right? But I needed to get loans to finish school, not knowing that my tuition was not going to get that far with the scholarship that I had. So I got cheerleading scholarship. I ran track. I worked part-time and I was still failing at least one class and I needed help. And it came down to me and my mother going to the financial aid office and talking to the head of financial aid. And he told us to our face, yo, if you can't afford to be here, you shouldn't be here. And that was enough for my mother and I to decide, no, I'm graduating just to spite you. And my mother took on another job to help me pay for school. And I was able to get her help and the help of others just to finish. And I finished with an exercise science degree and take the LSAT, take the GRE, look up, say, which one can I afford? I can't go to Notre Dame for law school because can't afford to go, can't afford to get there. I got into the journalism program at the University of Oklahoma, and I said, okay, load up the Alero. And that's how I ended up grad school at the University of Oklahoma. It's not necessarily something that I plan to do, stay in state. It's something I had to do, which I think is also indicative of many people's experience, right? It's great if you get into school at, say, USC. But if you can't afford to get there, what's the admission worth to you? Yeah. And I could afford to live in Norman, and I could afford to work in Norman. And that's about the time that I decided I wanted to be something like a sports writer. I say something like, because the job at the time I wanted, only one person had. It was Bill Simmons at ESPN, where he just got to write whatever he felt like writing. And I had to learn that that is not news. That is not journalism. And that was a real awakening. But as I learned basic AP style, as I learned news writing, as I learned what qualifies for news and what qualifies for story, what qualifies for feature, the difference between column writing and enterprise writing. I also started to put together a Rolodex of mentors like Ben and Ziva Brandstetter, who's at the Washington Post now. Folks that helped me get the diversity fellowship for the IRE, investigative reporters and editors, so I could just meet people, right? And I thought that was going to go well, but it didn't go as I had planned it to go, like many things don't. I got married, got divorced. I had moved back to Tulsa, and I decided I was going to go back to grad school, right, to try to get a PhD in English going. I could be an English professor. I like it. It's fine. I'm good at it. I have the master's that will carry me through. And I got into the program at Oklahoma State to study creative nonfiction. Then I needed to absolutely eat. So in the middle of trying to figure out what I was going to do, I managed to sell a book proposal, right, for Let It Bang. And that was enough of a advance to put food on the table, but not to keep food on the table. As I was trying to do that, I also fall in love. I meet the woman that I'm still with today, my partner, Laurel, who was very supportive of, hey, you know how you like to work out and be on a step mill? Yeah. Why don't you just talk about that on a YouTube channel? Why don't you vlog about it going back to school? Mm-hmm. So I did that. But the thing that actually hit, the thing that people wanted to hear me talk about on YouTube was OU football, which I'd spent a little bit of time covering just out of grad school. Didn't go the way I wanted to go, but I knew all the players, and I had covered many of them since high school. So I had stories about them that I could tell that were really great. 2017 Oklahoma is still my favorite OU football team of all time. And that's my team. I'm from Oklahoma. So you're either a Pokes fan or a Sooners fan. And in East Tulsa, there's more Pokes fans than Sooners fans. And I enjoyed that. I like being the OU guy in the middle of a sea of orange. But I was good at that. And I was good enough that people wanted to put me on radio shows. And by the time I look up, I had a job writing about OU football again, making videos on YouTube. Also got AdSense revenue that allowed me to go get grocery. That became a radio show that I hosted in Tulsa Monday through Friday, 9 to 11. The RJ Young Show, not my idea. And around 2020, not around 2020, exactly in 2020, months after Breonna Taylor was killed in her bed, and weeks
Breonna
before,
Taylor is in Louisville, Kentucky.
Yes. And weeks before George Floyd was murdered in the street on video, ESPN had asked if I wanted to do weekend radio. Mm-hmm. And I said, absolutely. And then we had the 2020 that we had, which was wild for me because I was having this great experience in my career while having to educate folks about Black experience in a way that perhaps they hadn't been before while being skeptical. So in my head, I had written Let It Bang, which is about me trying to get my ex-wife's father-in-law to like me, right? Because I happened to, at the time, marry into the only family where the patriarch could give a damn about college football. Mm-hmm. My life, right? But he liked to shoot guns. And I didn't know anything about guns, but I remember that the first thing that he ever told me or tried to do for me was hand me a gun he was very proud of, a Taurus Judge kind of revolver you can cross load with 45 long Colts, right? And shotgun shells. And I didn't know what to do with that. I was actually very much scared. But no, this is a trophy. This is him saying hi. So I got really good with a pistol. The NRA certified me as a pistol instructor because I was that good with a Glock 17, as it were. I don't shoot anymore. I did that to try to get to talk about him, right? And you can't form a relationship with a man that's based on your mutual love of his daughter. It's just not going to work. But we can talk guns, right? So I'd done all of this, and I'd done all this as Ferguson was going on. I'd done all this just years after Trayvon Martin was killed because he weaponized the sidewalk in Florida. I still can't get over that. The idea, back to Blade, I'm a threat because I'm walking. You know, 17 years old, Arizona tea and Skittles.
Yeah.
So I had all that going on in 2020. And I remember telling Laurel, as she was pointing to the TV screen where people were protesting in Minneapolis following George's murder, I said, we did this before. They don't care. They don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But it felt like something was going to happen because we were in the year of the plague, and we were also drawing attention to this other ongoing plague. And we're in the streets when we shouldn't be in the streets because this other plague is much more likely to kill us than COVID-19, which is wild, right? On its face, but also because COVID-19 disproportionately affected Black folks because they are predisposed in many places to be in the industries that are most affected by COVID-19 service, right? We got to go to work if we want to get paid, if we want to eat. We don't get to work out at home for the most part. And I'm doing all of this as folks are.
Your response was your response to seeing George Floyd protests was, we've been here.
Yeah, not just we've been here. I was standing up in her living room as she was sitting down. And I said, not that we've been here. They don't care. You know, and this is me. I'm 33 at that time because I turned 36 in July. But I was thinking about, to your point about trying to condense the timeline here because this isn't that far away. Hey, man, 2012 was 8 years ago. Yeah. Ferguson was 4 years ago. I don't want to keep doing this and keep giving my brain to it.
Yeah.
Which is how I ended up with the massacre as a topic. I was going, well, I mean, since we're here talking about Black history, here's some in my backyard. And folks were really saying, I'd never heard of this, or I'd never heard of this until I saw Watchmen on HBO, the TV show. And I'm thinking to myself, A, it takes an HBO TV show for you to know about this. And B, they did it in such a way that they still had people questioning whether or not this was real. And I thought the thing to question was, wait, y'all created a world where reparations were paid? That's the fantasy here. This other part where you got cops dressing up as superheroes, I'd argue they do that anyway.
Yeah.
I'd argue they do that right now. Cosplaying.
I can show you.
So as I'm doing this, I'm writing these things down, and my literary agent, Michelle Tesler, has the bright idea. Hey, remember when you wanted to write that book about the race massacre? I think now might be the time.
Yeah.
And that book got sold.
So this had come up before?
Yeah.
Talks with your agent?
Well, I mean, I'm sure you've had a conversation like this one, Ben, but your book idea might be too regional.
Yeah.
Right. But after, I'd pitched this before Watchmen, right? And before the summer of 2020.
Yeah.
And more people knew. It was much more of a national conversation, and we were coming up on the centennial. But I was also very clear that I did not want to write a book that came out at the centennial. I wanted to write a book.
Because you become another profiteer. Is that right?
Yes. And also, I didn't think I could do that. I won't do that. And the kind of book that you would need to write for something like that is going to be bad. It's not going to be a good book. It's not going to be a book you feel good about writing. It's not going to be a book that people feel good about reading. And I'm already writing books that are dreary, right? Black history is not fun. That's why it's Black history.
Doesn't always work out, does it?
Man, look. So like, again, Shot in Moonlight. I'm like, wait, Ben found a good Black history story that I want to read. Leave it to you, man.
The one.
But I end up wanting to write about it from two angles. One, I want to talk about all the things that were important to me in Tulsa.
Yeah.
And mostly the things that I believe that even Tulsans get wrong. Not just inaccurate, but just wrong on their face.
Yeah.
And why we allow that to happen and why it was such a big deal. Because remember, it's not just George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the plague. Donald Trump had his first rally in my city. And I recorded that. I was walking around. We boarded up our buildings and our house. I was embarrassed at how we had responded to this because people really believed that violence was going to break out because Donald Trump was holding a rally at the BOK Center, which is also the same center where I see Jason Isbell or even Garth Brooks perform or Bruce Springsteen for $7. That in and of itself. I wanted to go see Bruce Springsteen for $7 on a Tuesday night at the BOK.
That's incredible.
Right. But that also underscores just what Tulsa is. It is not an East Street band town, right? I know people can't get those tickets. They're like, $7? Yeah, man. I walked in. They said, hey, seats, supposed to sit here, but nobody's going to say anything. That's Tulsa. But I made a point to write down all of those things as I saw them.
Yeah.
And to be as clear as I possibly could about what is and isn't happening. And I kept coming across a disconnect that would enrage me. And I'll credit my editor, Mensa Damari. He's going, I don't care that you're mad about it. I care that we use that in the book in a way that pushes forward the book, which is frankly a grace. I like to say, Ben, I most empathize with Eric Killmonger in Black Panther because he's right. He's right. He's upset. He's mad. He's raised in Oakland at a time when his mother's in jail for basically being a Black Panther, and his family left him. And he knew about this place where it was all sacred and great, and he wanted to know why you wouldn't share. That's how I feel about this city. It's sacred and great, and people don't actually want to share or even properly memorialize or commiserate about what had occurred here now over 100 years ago. I ride a motorcycle. I went out before we started speaking today, and I rode past Oaklawn Cemetery, which is down the street from my home, and a place where they uncovered mass graves of victims of the Tulsa Race Massacre after over 100 years of telling us it wasn't true. There's nobody there. And Mayor Bynum decided to try to go and, hey, we're going to excavate it. If nothing else, just prove that we're not lying to you. That didn't go as planned now, did it, dude? And we still might be coming across other spots around town where people's families were severed. Because the story was the Black folks that stayed are the Black folks that stayed, and most of them left. They scattered to the wind. Lovecraft Country, it's another HBO show, but a better novel by Matt Ruff that speaks to this. A Black family had fled Tulsa after the massacre, in the massacre, to Chicago. And I know that story happens in California, in Milwaukee, and there's all sorts of tentacles about it. But I'm here, and I've been here since I was 13 years old. I went to high school here. I went to college here. I created a YouTube channel that was good enough for Fox Sports to knock down my door and ask me if I wanted a job. And I made a point of saying,
an incredible following, which you've built from scratch. I'm doing this a long time, much longer than you are. I have a much smaller following than you do. What you've built is impressive, and you've done it though in the sports world. This is not a sports book. You have something to say that has nothing really much at all to do with sports. So you're kind of stepping outside of your audience, aren't you, with a book like this? Or is this a book that's targeted for the audience that you have, that pays attention to you talking about Sooners football?
I would hope that the latter is true, but the former is probably more true, or truer. I look at it this way. I wanted to write about sports because sports is how I can view society, and it makes sense to me, right? Sports is a prism for which society shows me what it values and why it values it, right? That's always been a very interesting place for me to be because Black folks, Black men in particular, are overrepresented in the sports that I most love, right? Football, basketball. And it used to be baseball, but now that's a different conversation, which I think is fun, but not one that people want to really investigate. For instance, last year, the World Series did not feature a single Black-born player from the United States.
Huh.
Yeah, right? And this is at a time when, history is still being made, right? Tampa Bay Rays, I hope that they set the new record for most consecutive wins to start a regular season, as I came up playing baseball before I played anything else. Right? Wearing 42 and 24.
Yeah.
42 was taken, I wore 24. 24 was taken, I wore 42. Because Jackie Robinson and Ken Griffey Jr. Were both idols of mine, especially growing up in Panama City, where R.L. Turner Little League had played in the Williamsport Little League World Series. Great baseball city, but so is Tulsa. So I had done all of this thinking, yeah, I want to stay in Tulsa because this place is my home. And before I got to Fox, I was fortunate enough to purchase a house. Ben,
Just the planting of your flag in that place, right? Tell me how important this is.
it's the most important thing that I have ever done. A lot of that comes from being able to find people that want to talk about Oklahoma football with me and then college football with me, or like how I spoke about it. Because the thing that has always been kind of interesting about what I do for a living is you can find the information almost anywhere. We, in this country, we cover sports better than we cover almost anything. And that can be nauseating. That can really make your head explode if you think about it. But having someone that wants to hear what you have to say is not something I took for granted.
Yeah.
And I had been able to do that in Tulsa. And I can't, and this is 2019, so the housing market is something different, but I got to participate. Then when I was 16, my mother and I came up with a plan that was going to allow for me to pay a car note, pay an apartment rent, and maybe have a little bit of money to go on vacation for 2 weeks a year. Because that was my dream, which seems so small, but inside of my family, that's a very big deal.
Yeah.
Right? You would be able to own a car and you would be able to go on vacation. What is that? So when I had an opportunity to purchase a home, and my friend Steve Bullard was able to help me secure this one, I can't tell you how many times I have been crying in my house, dude. Even when the ceiling fell through and I had to get that replaced, or the 30-year-old air conditioning unit and HVAC system, I had to be replaced. It's my home, dude.
Yeah. How do you refer to it in the book as an act of resistance? Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I also use it as a way to speak with authority that I wish more people had access to. The reason I can write a book like Requiem, that is, I believe, the best thing that I've ever written, is because I, as a Tulsan, mostly unassailable, right? High school, college, graduate school, came back, had opportunities to leave. Probably easier to do my job in Los Angeles than it is in Tulsa. But my bosses believed me when I told them, I got to be here. I need to be here. This is how I know how to do this. And they said, okay. To the point of an act of resistance. Yeah, man, because I got it written down. Everybody's got it written down. White folks went into my neighborhoods and burned them down.
Right.
Right? I mean, that's a fact. To say that it can't happen again is negligent.
Yeah.
And I will be here. Right? Yeah. And I will be in East Tulsa, where my neighbors look like me, but are also God, I love my neighborhood. There's Vietnamese family over here. There's a Hispanic family over here. There's Native American family over there. And I'm across the street from a preschool where people pick up their kids and I get to see smiling faces all the time. But yeah, like
you talk about this place that you love, home. There's a saying, don't shit where you eat. In other words, be careful, like when you choose to write about the place that you live. And I wonder if people, you're not easy on many people in Tulsa in this book. It doesn't pull punches. It points out garish examples of the appropriation of a tragedy, of the commercialization of death, massive death 100 years later. The public commercialization of that. I don't know how she put it. It leaves a reader at times offended that collectively this city would choose to like do things, to rename the street. from the racist Brady, for instance, to the photographer Brady. I mean, just anyways, it indicts Tulsa and your neighbors in a way. Were you conscious of that as you were writing it, and how people responded?
Yeah, I was very conscious of it. I take aim at Black Wall Street because it doesn't exist. It's not even a misnomer. It's just wrong. There's no bank. There's no stock market. It was a closed circuit district where Black folks patronized each other because they had to.
Yeah.
You cannot leave that district and expect to thrive. If anything, you will be met with violence, right? And in that way, yeah, you make each other richer because you are the district. You have to purchase from each other. You learn to get along with each other. What I find to be most hard about that is that folks that live at the outskirts of Greenwood could look at that and feel jealousy. I'm thinking to myself, you got all of Tulsa to yourself, the way that you wanted it. And we are working within the society that you created to try to just live. And we can't have that. I see aspects of that all over Tulsa today. It's even in some of the statues that we have. The idea that I would want to go to a place called Reconciliation Park and see a Black baby in a white man's hands claiming to be the Red Cross, as if we would just give you our children or we would just leave them there. That's not what a human being would do. You know, one of my favorite Katrina stories is about a man who got dozens of dogs at his house. People came back, said, after reading, I think still had the Times-Picayune, reading in the paper that he had adopted all these dogs because they were drowning and or going to die. Somebody tried to come to his door and claim their dog. And he said, first, no, you left your dog. Your dog's my dog. Second, the dog didn't want anything to do with that owner either. Like, he snapped at it. And I love that story. But it's that idea that no. We will take care of each other. And we try to. I also think the reason that many people cling to things like Black Wall Street as a moniker is because they can talk themselves into feeling good about that. That it's elite, that it makes the place magical. And I don't believe in that at all. If anything, I use excellence as a pejorative because it is unsustainable. You can't keep that up as a human being. But I did hear from folks who didn't like what I wrote, but I said, cool, tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where it's inaccurate. Tell me what I said or wrote that is not true. And why are you telling on us? Because you won't do it. And because I live here. And I guess this is the part where I was paying attention at things like the Mayborn Literary Nonfiction Conference. It's like, no, what's the truth, dude? Tell the truth, tell it straight. That's what you're here to do. And I wish that somebody had done that for me, you know, or read these things and having to go through all of these records and all of these books to find out that nobody could tell me where Black Wall Street came from.
Yeah.
You know, or that it being attributed
to because it's as a, you know, I mean, this is not it's not pitched or billed as a book of history, but it's an inquiry into the past, right? And what happens is, in so many of these cases, Rosewood is a prime example. The story gets bent, it gets changed, and it gets molded. And in the retelling of it, it sometimes loses track of its center and takes on different elements that give it a different shape altogether. And this is very much the case with the Tulsa Massacre, right? I mean, not just that you know, that little details are misremembered or mistold, or you know, these giant mysteries remain about incendiaries falling from planes as they're being thrown from planes and so forth. But the fabric is so frayed that it leaves room for something like Black Wall Street, a falsity, to enter the picture and become a part of the story, right? And how we, guys like me, remember this or think of it, Black Wall Street. And this is not true. How did you learn this?
Well, I mean, it's a great point you bring up about how these things grow in absence of something else to fill the void. I like the idea of narrative fallacy as it affects nonfiction, because it is a human being's tendency to want to create a story that makes sense where there is not a story that makes sense. But one of the things I love about nonfiction is none of it makes sense. I don't have to make it up because it's all true, right? Like that's the point. But there is a 50-year gap where neither the Tulsa Tribune, which was one of the papers of record, or the Tulsa World, which is still the paper of record, did not mention the race massacre in any shape or form. The Tribune, I believe, went 52 years without mentioning it. And I believe during that time, people will come up with all sorts of things, especially when you fear retribution for mentioning that this family or that family participated in the murder, rapes, pillaging of their neighbors. That part. I don't know how to make that real to someone that you could fear, someone who was still alive, except to point to acts of domestic violence, right? That's where these things can come from. And you will tell yourself a story to survive. You will tell yourself a story that gets you from one place to another. And that's why the memoir part of the story is so big to me.
Yeah.
I needed to continue to try to tell myself a story about how maybe I could end up doing sports for a living at a time when that was not open to me. But given the opportunity to know truth, I want to know truth. I don't want to be ignorant. And I also don't want to perpetuate a lie because it is disrespectful to the people that lived. You know, like that's grandmommy.
Yeah.
Right there. I also think here.
Let me pause you real quick. Hold on. Come right back to it. Let me just encourage you. We're running short on time here, but if in the last few minutes, if you're still with us and you'd like to ask a question of RJ that I failed to ask, please drop it in that question box down there on your screen, and we'll be happy to address it. Sorry to cut you off. Go
no,
ahead.
please. And I appreciate that.
And thanks to Lisa who bought the book.
Really? Right on. Thank you. Yeah.
This is what you should do. You just sell it, RJ. Just do it yourself on here.
I find it interesting and fascinating that Ben, or my editor Mensa, folks that aren't living in Tulsa, right, will read this book and feel something like irritated, annoyed, even angry.
I think I said outrage.
Outrage. Because it just ain't that way at home. The things that we do and the ways in which we garner attention are all supposed to be nice. This is a booster city. Boosterism, right? You're trying to recruit people to the area still today. I'm offended that George Kaiser's foundation would give grants to people that would move to Tulsa. I'm like, hey, dog, I live here my whole life. Come on now. You know, and not for nothing, but I like to think I add something of value to the place now, right? Like that's the story to tell. Or I sit on the alumni board at the University of Tulsa, and I make it very clear that I want the kids that look like me, that grow up here, to think of that as their city college. How do I do that? How do I make this place real to them? How do I make it a place that they want to attend and they want to stay? All because of how we acknowledge the East Coast or West Coast and how they treat us until we are mad. And our mad will show up at a ballot box more than it shows up anywhere else. Nobody likes to be put down or talked down to. And I think that's one of the ways in which the disconnect happens, right? Yeah, if you're not from here, I don't have to take you seriously. Yeah. That has always been me. I'm from here. You have to take me seriously. I'm not going anywhere. I'm down the street. You can talk to me. Or you'll know that I'm going to show up at your doorstep. And I'm going to go, why is James Baldwin on the side of a museum that's supposed to be about the Black history in Tulsa? James Baldwin was never here. Right. Or, you know, why does a governor that is going to ban critical race theory, whatever the hell that is, sit prominently as one of the folks that help erect this building?
RJ, how does this feel? By the way, how does this feel that this is playing out at the same time that you inject this book into American letters? This sort of pushback against, it's not CRT, right? This is just the name that they put on this period of time that we're in, which is telling a more honest and history that is not that's not exclusively from a white perspective. It's the great loosening of the perspective of American history. Finally, but we're dealing with this pushback by government, and let's just right-wing governors, primarily in Florida and Oklahoma and Texas and elsewhere, against just the notion that people want to study or should study this type of history. For me, it's incredibly frustrating. For you, you've written a book that would be rejected in a place like Florida, that probably wouldn't find its way into public school libraries in Florida because of its content.
I'm let down by what qualifies for irritation, or what qualifies for violent thought, if there is such a thing. If we're going to go to George Orwell in 1984 and see what that has to say about this. But Ben, I know how to suffer. I know what pain feels like, right? When I see these things, or when I hear people talk about them, I think, what has happened in your life that has allowed you to be what you purport not to be? Feeble-minded, unwilling to hear someone else's point of view for fear that your point of view will crumble beneath it.
Let's talk about this after. Oh boy, something else, some kinds of religion, doesn't it? Like, resist any other sort of form of thought, and because you're really deep down afraid that your own religion will crumble if it's challenged. And
to that end, right? Self-confidence, self-esteem. I think those things do. When people talk about building character, you usually got to suffer to do that. Right. And that usually means you are inundated with other people's forms of thinking, and you come to find out what you think. Now, for me, I'm Black in mostly white places, which means that I got to have a backbone if I'm going anywhere, because I'm going to be surrounded by a bunch of people who think and or feel differently than I do. And I got to be able to hear them and not attack them, right? Not pick a fight, and let it go, and or engage them when they are willing to be engaged. What I also find to be really terrible about that is nobody has to listen to anything I have to say in a way that, say, the majority of this country is white, or identifies as white, or at least looks at the world through a white male lens. So if you want to mute me, you can. There's a whole world out there that has nothing to do with parts of living and ways of living for which you are not familiar. And that terrifies me, because I exist. I'm here. There are other people that exist differently than that. And it's a simple human characteristic to honor that, to honor other forms of getting down. Right. And that's why I wrote this book.
It's also, while it takes aim at Tulsa in this intense way, I think it loves Tulsa in the best way. We're not. If you're taking it easy, you don't appreciate the place like you do if you're if you're critical in the ways in which this book is, and the smart ways. We've got 1 minute left, but RJ, for those who are still hanging around, tell people why one last pitch, why they ought to buy this. Why they ought to buy this book and give it a read.
If you are unfamiliar with the Tulsa Race Massacre, you will learn quite a bit about why it is significant. If you are familiar with the Tulsa Race Massacre, you'll probably learn even more about why it is significant. I happen to be at the center of it because that's the only way I knew how to tell the story correctly. It is the best thing that I have ever written, and I'll say it my damn self, Ben. I'm a damn good writer. I'm good at it, and this is the best thing that I've ever produced.
It's a book that deserves a wide audience, and I say that because I've read it twice, and I believe it to be true. It's about my hometown. It's told in a compelling and readable and engageable, and also in a way that made me, as a 45-year-old white guy who's grown up in a lot of different places, made me outraged and thoughtful in the right kinds of ways, introspective. It made me understand. It made me, first of all, learn about a thing I thought I knew a lot about, and it made me understand what it's like to be involved and to sort of be in the middle of that and to watch that. And it's like America concentrate. Somehow this book boils down or concentrates, I think, what's going on in politics right now and places it in a frame of race. And that's, in my mind, something that we do so much more of. Thank you to Barbara's bookstore, the oldest independent bookstore in Chicago. I heard you all have been around since 1963. What an incredible thing. Thank you for hosting this. And to my friend RJ, it's been wonderful to chat with you. If anybody's sticking around this long, we really appreciate your attention, and hope you've had a good time.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, RJ. We'll see you, my friend.
All right, brother.